what we thought might be another addition or two in the secondary for Michigan wound up being 4. They rounded this thing out pretty nicely now with adding former Albany cornerback Aamir Hill, added former Georgia Tech, Tennessee, and Louisville safety Wesley Walker, Michigan State safety Jaden Mangham was a guy that was added on that same day on Friday, and then to round things out Saturday with the addition of Ricky Johnson from UNLV. And we'll go guy by guy here really quick, but I wanted to start with this in that, the secondary, you looked at it on paper before last week. You're like, yeah, they could probably afford to add a guy here or there to solidify that depth. And now I think with this cluster as a whole, you're looking at, I don't think depth is a question mark. I think maybe quality of depth, quality of competition, maybe the question heading into fall camp. But, when we talked about a couple of weeks ago, what were the remaining holes on this roster coming out of spring football, really secondary depth was, at least on that side of the ball, kind of sticking out like a sore thumb. And now I'm not quite ready to say it's the strength of the defense. I think that's still probably the guys you have up front, but they did a hell of a job rounding this thing out. And now I think you're staring at a situation where, a guy like Quentin Johnson, he's, 6th year in college, but he's going to be fighting for playing time. Wesley Walker will fight for playing time. Jaden Mangham, he's not just going to come and plug into the starting lineup. He's going to be part of a rotation now. So what did you make of these additions, the totality of them last week?
I thought it was great. I would have liked to see one more linebacker probably if we're talking about defense. And people are saying, well, the defense is set. And I'm looking at the backups, to Jay Sean Barham and Ernest Hausman. And I'm thinking, man, if they had one more guy like they did last year, Hausman being that guy, finishing 3rd on the team in tackles, I'd feel a lot better. But, you don't replace a Rod Moore. And I wrote that in the football preview. This is a guy who is elite at that position, All-American, one of the best quarterbacks they've ever had in the secondary, outstanding instincts. This guy's just a big playmaker. So, but you can do it by committee so that you have enough guys there now. And they were thin. There's no question about it. So landing the guys they did, I thought was huge. Getting Mangham from Michigan State, I thought was a coup. I really thought you did a great job with that piece on his addition and speaking to the people at Spartan Mag. So you got some truth out of him, which was fantastic. And I think this kid is going to be a good, nice fit here. I think he's going to understand the expectations are a little higher, with all due respect, when you're coming to the national champions. But I think in that respect, I think the guys on the team and the guys on the defense are going to let him know that, hey, we don't take plays off here. This is the way we do it if you want to be a champion. So like that, I really like Aamir Hill too. I was watching his film, and who knows if he'll be the next Josh Wallace, AB, but this is a guy that's shown that he can play at that level. He's got great skills, great skill set if you watch his film. So I like Jair Hill and his potential. He needed to grow up, but I'm sorry, Aamir Hall. Yes, I got he and Jair mixed up, but Aamir, to me, is a guy that's going to be able to contribute and is going to add some depth there. So I like what they did on that side of the ball. To me, it still comes down to, the quarterback. They maybe back channeled a couple of guys, didn't get them, so they're going to have to go with what they had, and that's going to make or break this team, in my opinion. But overall, you got to give them an A minus for what they did in the portal. When you add a Barham, when you add a Josh Krieb on the offensive line, guys that are all conference at their positions that are going to have a good chance to be all conference again this year at Michigan.
Yeah, well, let's start with the cornerbacks and how these guys might fit in. Obviously, you hit on Aamir Hall there. His background, obviously played last year at Albany, spent the first 3 years of his career, at Richmond. Last season, totaled 57 tackles, 5 interceptions, 13 passes defended, along with a forced fumble, and graded out elite. I mean, Pro Football Focus, you got to give those guys credit. They're breaking down FCS film, too. He grades out at an 85.7 overall, which is extremely good, just short of elite, with an 88.3 coverage grade. This, I think you hit on it with him and Jair Hill. You're probably looking at those being the primary 2 guys that compete for the number 2 cornerback job aside from Will Johnson. And, to me, I think that at worst with an addition like this, you're getting a guy who is a veteran in the room, who's played a lot of football, who's seen a lot of things. But when you look at his film too, I mean, I think a lot of the things that he does will translate. Mm-hmm. And he was sort of the guy, right? Now he would be the other guy on the opposite side of Will Johnson. So at worst, I think you're getting quality depth. And at best, you might have this year's version of Josh Wallace.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if you look at the instincts, 5 picks, is 5 picks. I don't care where you get him. I mean, you have a nose for the ball. So, and like you said, he's played a ton of football. So we're going to find out, and he's going to find out that it's a little bit different at this level. But Josh Wallace did, and guess what? By the end of the year, he had played some outstanding football here. I don't care what anybody says. Everybody looks at the play or two that he got beat over the top. Oh, my God, this isn't UMass. That kid had a fantastic season, was a huge reason that Michigan won the national championship. So Aamir Hall is going to be a portion of this defense. He's going to have to play, AB, unless somebody else steps up that we aren't seeing. And I think that when they evaluated on him on film from the people that I spoke with, he jumped out to them and said, this is a guy that can help us. So in that respect, I really like that get.
Stay with the cornerbacks now. We'll talk about Ricky Johnson, who Michigan pulled from UNLV. He had previously pledged to Washington State. He has 2 years of eligibility remaining, and I think at the time On3's industry ranking had him as the number 788 player in the portal this offseason. Mind you, there have been thousands of guys in there, but last year plays in 12 games with 35 tackles, 6 passes defended, 25 catches on 39 targets. Pro Football Focus not as kind to him on coverage, more of average to below average. His grade was 54.3, which when you start talking about those orange grades, the dark red grades, it's not really what you want to see there. His addition to me is the one that rounds out the depth in the room.
I agree
because
yeah. Go ahead. And yeah, I see he's listed as a safety. I think he can play both, if I'm not mistaken. But when you're, if you're grading that in coverage, you got to be able to cover whether you're playing safety or corner. But I'm with you there on that. I think it's depth. You need bodies. It's kind of like wide receiver, right? When we were talking about that, when Kirk Campbell told us after the spring game, he said, just by sheer numbers, we need bodies in there. And that's exactly what they got, in my opinion. I don't think they got any difference makers getting a Morian Walker back, for example. So, but yeah, I think he's a piece of depth, and I think he'll be well coached. I think that there's no question about that here at Michigan. So be interesting to see how he fits.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the other guys at the position too. I mean, obviously, Will Johnson, Jair Hall exit the spring as maybe those top 2 guys on the depth chart, and Jaden McBurrows is in the mix there. Again, this is his 4th year in college. Like I'm waiting to see kind of the light turn on for him, and maybe it hasn't quite to this point. Miles Pollard, Cody Jones. They needed to add guys there. I mean, when you look at a 2-deep depth chart, you see, no offense to the young man, but when Keyshawn Harris is there, you need to fortify that depth a little bit. And certainly he'll have a role on special teams as well. But cornerbacks overall, I mean, again, you'd like to see someone a little more proven at this level of college football on the other side of Will Johnson. But, when you have him, when you have the safeties that they do, when you have the defensive line, the front 7 that this team does, I think overall this room is no question better than it was this time a week ago. Let's move to safeties now. Now we know Rod Moore's out for the year. Makari Page is going to start in one of those spots. And then from there, I think he's the one guy where you can say he'll probably play the lion's share of the snaps in the secondary at the safety spot. But Quentin Johnson is a guy who's going to have to compete for time. Wesley Walker is a guy I'm really interested in. You look at him, he adds, with the guys they added over the weekend, I think Michigan added like 1,200 or 1,300 snaps of play from last year to its secondary in terms of the guys at safety. And, when Keon Saab transfers, Rod Moore is out for the year. Zeke Berry seems like is kind of being groomed to be the starting nickel. So I don't know how much he factors into the safety situation. And the moves that they made this week suggest that these guys they brought in will play a ton. But Walker started at Tennessee last year, played 636 snaps, recorded a 70.5 overall grade on PFF with a 75.0 coverage mark, which is in line with what he's been most of his career. So to me, you look at a guy like him, and I think it's, you look at the safety rotation. They played 4 guys last year that had at least 300 snaps with Rod Moore, Makari Page, Keon Saab, Quentin Johnson. They needed to add 2 guys with experience. And I thought that some people maybe didn't put as much of a premium on that being a need, but Not only did they attack it, but they got quite a bit of experience to fill that role.
And those guys get banged up too. No question about it. They needed bodies there too. I'd love you to do me a favor and look up and see how his PFF grade compares to Quentin Johnson and Makari Page from last year, because watching him play and watching his clips, I thought he had a great year. Really a guy that knows where the ball is, gets to the ball, and again, has played a lot of football. So I like what I saw from him. And to me, he's going to, they could have a hard time keeping him off the field. I thought Quentin Johnson played his best football at the end of the year, and that he continued to progress, right? And to the point by the end of the year, he was really, it was really an advantage having him on the field. So at the same time, now he's got some competition. So these guys should bring out the best in each other.
You ready for this? I had this one queued up for you.
Yep.
Quentin Johnson was a 75.5 overall last year, 79.6 in coverage. And actually, both of those marks are the best among any of the safeties on the roster right now. So maybe Quentin Johnson being a little underrated. Makari Page, 74.1. Also an extreme, maybe the most sure tackler on the team with an 86.0 tackling grade, 71.4 in coverage. So, yeah, I mean, I think they brought in a guy that is that caliber. I mean, that's, if we're not thinking too hard about it, maybe that's just your starting three. And we'll talk about Mangham here in a second. But I think that addition is one that maybe isn't getting talked about enough because of what came a few hours after that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And again, he's played at the highest level, right? The SEC, Michigan, Ohio State, SEC. You're talking about elite levels of college football, and played well there. So really nice pick up there. I think he's going to look good in the winged helmet. I think he's going to be one of those guys that, again, is going to be tough to keep off the field. But when you have three of them back there, that's a luxury.
All right, well, let's address the elephant in the room then. The one guy who's left, Jaden Mangham, joins this team now. He has 2 seasons of eligibility remaining. Last year at Michigan State, I just had the stats pulled up here. Where did I put it? Anyway, 53 tackles, 4 picks, 7 passes defended last season in East Lansing, which automatically made him one of their better defenders because that defense was absolutely atrocious. PFF graded him out as a 69.6 overall with a 64.8 coverage grade, 82.7 as a run defender, 66.2 as a tackler, and 54.8 as a pass rusher. This is a guy who, again, we're starting to see guys flip sides of the rivalry a lot more often in college sports in general because of NIL, because of the transfer portal. We're seeing it in the coaching ranks. Tony Alford comes over from Ohio State to Michigan. So it's not as crazy as it used to be. However, it's a little bit different sometimes when a guy comes from a program in Michigan State, who, we're not breaking any news here. That is you are recruited and molded to hate the Michigan Wolverines with every fiber of your being. And he knows that. He's a Beverly Hills, Michigan guy. Like I said, honorable mention, all Big Ten last season, and played some solid football. And to me, I think, when you watch him on film, you look at the way he graded out. He is a bit of a loose cannon. He's a guy that will go for the big hit, but he's also got really good ball skills too. And someone where I tend to think that this one might be a little more of a long-term play for Michigan. If we talk about those more veteran guys at the top of the depth chart, I think the biggest thing with Mangham is going to be his coaching staff reeling him in a little bit. That pressure's off of you of having to be one of the better players. He's going to factor in. I just listed that, the amount of snaps that 4 safeties played last year.
Yep.
So he's going to play and he's going to factor in. But, I think there's probably a little too much bluster on both sides about, you got Michigan State fans saying, he sucks, we didn't want him anyways. You got Michigan fans saying that you just pulled the best player off their defense. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle there, that more skews towards him being one of the better players on that team. But I like the addition, and it just adds a little more juice to, let's face it, Jonathan Smith and Sharon Moore aren't 2 guys that are really saying a lot to churn the fires in the rivalries. So maybe here's that first bit of juice of the new era of this thing.
Can you remember a Michigan coach that really called out Michigan State, or was it? I mean, you had Mark D'Antonio doing it to Michigan all the time. You had Bobby Williams doing it all the time. John L. Smith didn't, and they didn't like him. First of all, he couldn't beat Michigan or anybody else, for the most part. He was close, but didn't have the level of hatred that they prefer. I'm interested to see how the new John Smith is going to go over there, because he doesn't seem to share that hatred for Michigan that they do. So that's why part of the reason they loved Mark D'Antonio so much. Obviously, the winning didn't hurt either. But with Mangham, it's always good when you get the better players. For example, a Roddy Gale on the basketball side from Ohio State, and the players that you give back are guys that weren't going to play here, like a Samaj Bridgman or Ben Van Sumeren played a little bit there, I guess, at Michigan State, but nothing earth shattering. So Justin Boren's really the only one that I can think about. Several years ago, going to Ohio State and played pretty well there. But so it's always nice when you get the better of that deal. I really thought that the remarks on social media, at least the ones that were relayed to me, were over the top. This kid seems like a pretty good kid, and looks like he's going to be a good fit here. Will be very, very interesting to see how he is welcomed back. I think, what is he, a junior? He'll be a junior, if I'm not mistaken. So
correct.
So if he goes back to East Lansing next year, but hey, the kid can play. He needs to add some strength. If you look at his body, there's no question about it. And they're going to need him to tackle, right? I did like his run stopping grade that you brought up. I thought that was pretty big. And but to me, this is good depth. Again, a guy that's going to compete for a starting job and is really one of those guys that can play here. This isn't just a depth piece. This is a guy that's going to compete for playing time.
For sure. And again, with a Quentin Johnson, with a Wesley Walker. I mean, like I said, Makari Page is probably locked in there, but even when you go back and look at some of the things that Mangham himself said in spring ball, I mean, the new staff was up front with him saying that you miss too many tackles and we need you to bring it every single play. And we'll see if this Michigan staff can get that out of him. But the fact that he sort of self-admitted that that's something he needs to work on, again, I'm not really concerned about that, because I don't think they're going to have to lean on him the way that a Michigan State would have to lean on him this year. So we'll see what happens with him. Also, best of luck, obviously, to Samaj Bridgman. They're excited about that chance for him to play and make his mark in the rivalry as well. Any other thoughts on the defensive backs and really just the transfer portal in general? It seems like this week maybe there could be some news at defensive tackle, but
right.
Any other smoke there?
Not, just the Stephen F. I think the Stephen F. Austin kid is on campus right now, if I'm not mistaken. So, or at least was supposed to be the big defensive tackle. So, overall, like I said, there are a couple positions. I thought wide receiver would have been a bigger one. I thought one more linebacker, but it's been a net positive for Michigan again. And Jim Harbaugh started it. It's continued with Sharon Moore. They're doing a really nice job there, and it's only going to get better as they get more funding. AB, they still need to get some more money on the NIL side. And if you talk to the NIL guys, they will admit that, even though they've done a much better job, and I think they've got about 3 times the money that they had last year, at least just from the collective money. So that's a good start. So it's going to have to continue. But to me, these guys are doing their work and did a really nice job filling some needs.